So here we are at week 5 in our apologetics class, and all this is going on over in Israel. And like probably most of you, I had no idea till Saturday morning. I'm an early riser, got up and saw the headline, and immediately realized the lesson for this week was not going to work because there's something as Christians we need to understand what's happening over there, and in an odd way, it'll give us a sense of peace. Uh, it's hard. I don't know about you all. You watch the news, and there's all these things: the PLO, the Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, the revolutionary people, the Islamic jihadists, and Saudi Arabia trying to do a peace deal with Israel, and Iran not liking it, and all of this stuff going on. And then, 3,000 or so rockets rained down on Israel. And unlike other sort of terrorist attacks where they would just lob missiles into Tel Aviv or something, ground forces, they broke down the defensive wall that's Gaza Strip and killed a bunch of people, came into Gaza. I've spent time in Gaza, big city. I think 2 million live in that general area, Gaza Strip, most in the city, of course. But you see any of the video, they're going through there in cars, just shooting people randomly as they drive up and down the streets. So I've made several trips to Israel, and I remember one in particular. It seems to be one of their favorite targets. They had a Palestinian hopped in a minivan and headed into full speed a metro stop, a train, trolley, subway, bus kind of thing, and just plowed through the whole place. Came out the other end. Of course, now the minivan is all damaged, and he crashes into a wall across the street. Here come the local Israeli police coming up at him. He gets out with a big machete and charges the armed police, which, of course, they shoot the guy. I mean, there was certainly a time of unrest. That same time, down on the Gaza Strip, a IDF soldier got killed on the border in retaliation for something. And then Israel did something, and then the Palestinian on his own decided, I'm going to go into, I'll show you what you can do, and plows into all these Jews on the Palestinian side. And again, you're not familiar with all these locations yet. I'm going to walk you through some of that. So we're there. We have a tour we're going through there with. And when you're standing roughly where David's, you have to understand Jerusalem, particularly in the time of David, went down the side of Mount Moriah. It's not a city like this. Now it's turned into that eventually. It's sprawling all over the place. But and so David, his palace, and Bathsheba's place, Bethlehem, and so on, they're terraced down the side of this steep slope. So when you're there, and it goes in down to the Kidron Valley, and then comes up the other side, and then you have the Mount of Olives, and those kinds of things, Mount Scopus, and so on. And the east half of Jerusalem is controlled by the Palestinians, or supposed to be. It's occupied by the Palestinians. But the Jews have always put settlements in, or moved Jewish families into empty home, or whatever, encroached into that area as far as the Palestinians are concerned. So they have that whole side, and they have East Jerusalem. Well, so we were standing, if you can call it that, because it's fairly steep going down. But as you're looking across, coming down the right-hand side are what they believe are the ruins of where David's palace was up near the top. And there's a clear view across the valley to where the Palestinian homes are. And at the top of that, we heard an explosion, and you could see it right on the ridge. Huge column of smoke and gunfire and sirens and all kinds of things. And the Jewish tour guide with us, Dan, a lot of them are called Dan over there, Daniel. Dan, we said to Dan, should we get back to the bus? Do we belong here? That kind of thing. It's on the other side. And he said, no. He said, the Jews' policy is, if you're a terrorist and you harm somebody or kill those people at that bus station, they come over, they burn down your house. I mean, if you're still alive, you get arrested and a bunch of other stuff. But one of the things they do is burn your house to the ground. And that's what they're doing. He said that explosion is what sets off the fire in that house. And sure enough, the whole time we're going down that thing, you can just watch that. You can see flashing lights everywhere from the police force that was up there and so on. So they take violence against the Jews real serious over there. And we're going to see, I think, a lot of that. But so one of the things I'm going to tell you in advance before we start, I'm going to throw a lot at you this morning. When I get done, something I usually don't do, I have my speaker notes. And it has all these things on there. And so when you're watching CNN or Fox or something and you hear one of these, so you can look here and it'll tell you what that is, just sort of a little reference. And then in the back, which we're going to get to, Wes is off camera now and probably should be. The last page back here, we're going to get to this in the second half of the lesson. I've attached, thanks to Wikipedia, a map of the area, because we're going to talk about, you hear West Bank, Golan Heights, Gaza Strip, Gaza, all that business. We're going to look at a map and show you where some of that is. We may use this one here, I don't know. So with that, the two scriptures I wanted to read this morning. The first is Psalm 122, 6 and 7. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May those who love you be secure. May there be a peace within your walls and security within your citadels. And then Matthew 24, and this is Christ speaking, 6 to 8. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. What do you all think about what's happening over there right now?
I'm not sure. I think we're in the last days. I'm not saying it could be the next 5 years. It could be any time really. But
the Jews in the Holocaust probably thought that too. Holocaust, holy. Yes. Jews in the Holocaust probably thought that too. Yeah, for instance.
AI, and I really feel like
AI, artificial intelligence.
Yes.
Okay.
It's becoming they're very sophisticated now. If you've seen some of their robots they made, very sophisticated, and they can do twice as much as humans, or no, 3 times or 4 times as much as humans. And there's some other things that are going on in the world that I think when Jesus talked in Matthew, I think that these things are really happening right in front of our eyes. But I'm not willing to say, we just have to serve the Lord and not worry about it. He said it's going to be like a thief in the night, but it's going to be a time when we don't even expect it.
Yeah. That's a good point. There's a time when he returns, they're not going to expect his return. Right. Do you think we'd welcome his return right now?
We welcome his return?
Yeah.
I do.
Sure we would. Absolutely. This is the time. Come on, Jesus. This is, that's you right. Bet. This is, yeah. So let's talk about end time for just a second. For you to really understand all of the things that lead up to Jesus being revealed as the true Messiah and coming back, as you were referring to, you need to look from Genesis all the way through. I have an end time study I did. It takes over a year, and we'll go through all the prophecy. Christians tend to focus on the rapture, 666, Christ coming down on the clouds. What about the Jews? What's happening to the Jews through this time that's leading up to the Messiah? There's a lot. What happens to the Jews during the tribulation period, and then what happens to the Jews following Christ's return? It's amazing. It's just incredible. If you read through the New Testament prophecies, there isn't just prophecy like Jesus here is very important. He's talking about when he returns. There's Paul writing about the church in the last days and the horrible things the church starts to do. Um, if you get into the Jewish side, what's one of the things the Jews haven't done yet that's in prophecy? That's correct. There's not even a hint of being able to read. Now, they have a society over there that has the plans and they have the implements to go in, and their job is to be ready to build the temple again. And the Jews look forward to that. There's no indication that that's anytime soon, as another example. And we can apologize. This sinus, the allergy season, just drive me crazy. There have been times in history all along when people have stood up and said, "This is it. Hitler is the Antichrist," or the Black Plague is killing. And you read about in Revelation all these plagues, and the sea turns red, and all that sort of thing. We're better off, as you say, concentrating on today. And Jesus said, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God. Don't worry about these other things." But that's difficult to do when we see our friends in Israel going through what they're going through. It's hard to just take it one day at a time. I'm sure there's a group of people in this country who want to grab their rifles and fly over there. We had a bunch went to Ukraine. Just, hey, I'm going over there. I'm going to fight those guys. And we tend to think that fighting and war is the answer. Let's just kill off all the Hamas or whoever, pick your favorite enemy. That's never the answer, unfortunately. It sounds good on the surface, but that never works either. So we need to understand more about the layout over there, the main players in the Middle East, and all of that. And that's what I wanted to focus on today. So, who do you think the Palestinians are?
Philistines.
Aha. A Sunday school answer, if I ever heard one. The Philistines. And I'll bet you if we walked through this church and took a census of everybody in every class, they would say these are the Philistines.
Well, I don't know if they are.
Wrong. Wrong.
I just guess that they sound like
Yeah.
Philistines.
We think anybody that's an enemy of Israel is a Philistine. So here's our timeline here. This is a horrible BC, but 1002 BC, David became king of the united Israel. Was actually the first time. Saul was king, but it was really the first time that all the 12 tribes united behind a single leader. And 2 years later, 1000 BC, they tramp into Jerusalem. No, they don't tramp in, they tunnel in, actually. The Jebusites are living there. And David and them tunnel in and drive the Jebusites out. David declares Jerusalem as sort of the capital of the nation of Israel. It becomes known as the city of David. And that's the beginning of the Jews occupying Jerusalem. And we'll see a long history. We're going to talk about all these along here in a minute. Well, that was in 1000. Back here, we had our timeline further back, but I'm out of whiteboard. 1200 BC or so, Egypt and the Canaanites living along the Mediterranean coast. So Egypt's not on this map. It's a little piece of it's right there. But all this along in here, all the way up in the Lebanon, there's sea trade going on. Ships are coming in, bringing all kinds of cool things. And all this area exported a lot of things, olive oil, grain, so on. A lot of sea travel. And the people that manned those ships were called the sea peoples. The Phoenicians, some people were referred to, and they came from the Aegean Sea and Crete and Cyprus, all this way over here. And over time, some of them settled, and then more and more settled as you go all along this area here, loosely referred to as the sea peoples. And from those, we got the Philistines. And the Philistines built 5 cities, which I can never remember all of them, I apologize, but Gaza and Ashkelon, the 2 that are in the news today, are Philistine cities. They go all the way back to the day of the Philistines. You haven't been to Israel, so I'm going to have to ask you to use your imagination a little bit here. I guess this is, if you're in Israel and you're on the Jordan River looking across at Israel, this is a mountain. We call it the Highlands. Now it's probably not more than, I don't know, 5,000-6,000 feet in most places. Mount Hebron goes up a lot taller. But this is a mountain, and this is very mountainous on this side. It flattens out as you get near the Jordan Valley. That's what they call a valley, but it's a mountain. When you get over the edge of the highlands, Elah Valley and so on, Elah Valley, for instance, is where, what happened to Elah Valley? Who's this guy? What did he do in the Elah Valley? He brought down Goliath. The battle that David killed Goliath in the Elah Valley. It's referred to, and I mispronounce it all the time, as Shephelah or Shephelah. This side is all Kansas. You got mountain over here, and then you have these sort of rolling plains on this side. So grain, they grew a lot of grain on this side. Over here, the Jews, the Hebrews, they're doing wine, olive oil, raising cattle, sheep, all of that. And they would come up over the highlands and trade with each other. And the Philistines would trade wheat, barley, and so on, and Israel would bring olive oil, grapes, animals, so on. So a lot of trade in through here. When David comes to the throne, however, the Philistines become their enemy because now you have a united Israel. Nobody wants to see a united Israel, and especially the Philistines. They actually wanted what Israel had. No different today. When you go to Israel today, it's some of the finest farm country. They raise some of the best beef in the world. I mean, it's incredible how nice it is. It was described to Moses as a land with, big vineyards and, all that milk and honey. And, Israeli honey. Oh, you notice a difference. It's just incredible. So this is all generally flat. It kind of rolls a little bit. And if you go across the Elah Valley and you get down along in here, as you're coming to the main road that will take you to Gaza, you can look off to the side, and in the distance, you'll see a little rise. And later on, you'll see another rise, and eventually you'll see Tel Aviv, which I don't know on this map where it's at, but it's up there. It is right here. Between here and there, you see these little rises. That was the Philistines building up their sites, Ashkelon and so on, Gaza, Ashkelon, and so on. And those hills are still there. You can see where because if you're living on the plain, you want some defensive posture. So the town would build itself up, so they had some defensive posture. So the Philistines, 1200 BC. Well, we have on here 586 BC. Do we remember what happened? 585, 586, 587, pick your date. This is the siege of Jerusalem, and Nebuchadnezzar and his guys haul off the two southern tribes. Well, so for us Bible students, we just keep on going then. That's what happened. And well, they weren't the only ones that got hauled off. And later, as you approach like around 520 or so, I remember the dates, Nebuchadnezzar decides, you know what? It's one thing to own this side of the map. I'm going to own this side of the map. And he deals with the Philistines, and they are no more. And they go out of existence late 6th century, I think is a rough date for them. They're long gone. Then we have these other things that happen. So from 1000 BC to 586, Jerusalem was occupied primarily by Jews. That changed almost forever, starting in 586. They come back. There's two returns. They rebuild a temple, the city walls, and so on. But things don't go well as each empire comes in. And we come all the way around to 635. Anybody remember what 635 does for us? We are now in the Islamic period. The Muslim army, if you will, is spreading Islam everywhere. And in 635, there was a siege on Jerusalem, which ended when Umar, a caliphate of Muhammad, came in peacefully. It was all arranged. It was a diplomatic solution to the siege. They ended the siege. He came in. The temple mount, which back here in 70, I think it was 70 A.D., the temple gets destroyed. So all they have is what's there even today, just a flat floor, if you will, on top of the Wailing Wall. He came in and they had camped there, lived there. The siege had caused all kinds. It was just a nasty, nasty place. And he hired people actually, and hired slaves. They cleaned it all up. In 637, he built a structure on the site for Islam. And I think about 30 or so years later is when the Dome of the Rock went up. Do we know the significance of the location of the Dome of the Rock?
Well, actually, there's two ideas in Israel about where the temple was.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a group that believes, where David's temple was, that's, on the other side where you mentioned, where it's, on that slope and everything.
Yep.
They think the temple's, that's the real temple. But the people say now that where the Dome of the Rock is, well, the Islam building there, that's where the temple should be.
Yes. And why do they, so just so you understand a little bit. Do we know Mount Moriah? Do we remember that from our Bible studies at all? Boy, Janet's on top of it today. She's afraid she's going. And no, that's not from Oklahoma on the wind, Moriah. Pardon me? All right. How about Abraham and Mount Moriah?
Isaac.
That's right. Abraham was led to the top of this spot here.
Oh yeah, that's Mount Moriah.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah. Yeah, Abraham was led to the top of that, and that's where he was supposed to sacrifice Isaac. But what really happened is God provided the sacrifice at the top of Mount Moriah. And so when the Jews built the first temple, and again, this is where you find out Wes is just awful at art. That's about as crude as it gets. They built a retaining wall, huge, I mean, enormous, down at bedrock and then up. The Wailing Wall, what we call the Western Wall, is the exposed western side of that retention, that retaining wall. And they did the same thing in Greece. If you go to the Parthenon and all that, it's built on top of a mountain. Well, you have to level. So the pastor mentioned it, I think, a week or two ago as well. They built this giant, huge retaining wall, fill it in, put a floor on it, and then they built the temple on top of it. When they built the temple, one of the things in the temple is called what? What's the most important part of the temple? The Holy of Holies. Where do you suppose the Holy of Holies sits when they built the temple? It sits right on the spot where they believe Abraham sacrificed Isaac. And in fact, the pictures I've seen even today, so there's a floor built, okay, we talked about that, but the very top, and that's not huge, but the very rocky top of that is still exposed. That's very sacred. And the Muslims pretty much the same thing. Sacrifices would have been done there and so on. And that's still the case. The top of Mount Moriah is still exposed inside. But now it's the Dome of the Rock.
So you believe that is where they need to build the temple?
Oh, absolutely.
So you don't believe that where David's temple was?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I have never heard of David's temple, but okay.
Well,
David didn't build.
Yeah, he didn't have it. I mean, Solomon's temple. He built the temple.
Yeah, Solomon built the temple, and he built it up here, for sure. I'll bring something in next week.
I don't care.
No. I have a.
I've heard
if I had known you were going to bring this up today, I have a terrific thing that will show you what Solomon's temple.
There are people that saying they've
So-
done all this excavation where the temple would have had to be built, right where.
Yeah. Now who knows?
And also the little stream that runs through. In the Bible, it talks about how the temple was right next to that or something, and that was part of their purity. They went and baptized there and all this. I don't know if that's true or not.
I need to get you over to Israel. I can see that. But let's we're going to digress too much today. The Gihon Springs, that is correct. We need to get you over there. Anyway, if this is true, and if the Dome of the Rock sits on there, because Umar and the Muslims that followed, they wanted a site as sacred as Mecca for their worship people to, what do they call it? Not voyage. Yeah, you know, they go on that long journey. Anyway, they wanted something, and so that's how the Dome of the Rock became so sacred to them. And then, of course, there's also a mosque built on down from it, also on the mount. So what happens is, I'm going to take Mount Moriah out of there for a second. So what happens today is we have the Western Wailing Wall, you know, these huge Herodian, well, I shouldn't make them round, I think they're square, but in any case, this huge Herodian wall here on the western side is sacred to the Jews because it's as close to that as they can get. Well, guess what? Who else is it sacred to? Yeah, the Muslim faith. They want access to that as well. And that's where the skirmishes come in all the time around the Wailing and the Western Wall, because Israel's keeping them out. And they don't, that's one of many things the Palestinians don't care for at all. Anyway, we digress grossly. But so at 635, not only Omar cleaned things up, the Jews were allowed to live there for a bit. And then eventually it got nasty and they were all driven out of Jerusalem again. And then we have something right here called the Ottoman Empire going on. And they were who were the Ottomans? Turkish. And what faith were they? Muslim. Yeah. Yeah, they defeated another group, and you know, it's incredible. But a favorable environment arises for a while during the Ottoman Empire, and the Jews are allowed to return to Jerusalem in 912. A few years later, that guy dies off, a new guy comes in and absolutely not drives them out, kills them, and mass exodus out of there. And somewhere right in here, and I don't know the dates for all of this, but you'll get the idea. They don't call it Israel. In fact, they haven't called it Israel for a while. They call it, if I can write this correct, Palestine. And it becomes known as Palestine. So World War I, World War II, and during World War II, the English, England, they're given the authority to govern Palestine, which would have been this huge, huge thing in here. And the British Mandate, it was called. In 47, the British Mandate ends, and the Jews are allowed to return to Israel. But all of this, including this, is occupied by what faith? The Muslim. The only interruption in all of that was the Crusades. Back here, I don't know, about 1400, 12 to 1400, something like that. We had the Crusades. You had two different sets of them, but during those times, Jews were there. But again, they got driven out, and they really have not occupied Israel for hundreds and hundreds of years. So the British Mandate ends 1947, beginning of 48. I can't remember the date now. And the Jews are allowed to return. But none of these people want the Jews in there. and a war breaks out for their independence. And they win that war in 1948. And it's referred to in Israel as the War of Independence. Do you know who, I don't know if a majority, pretty close, a large number of the Israeli fighters, where did they come from?
America.
No.
America helped them a whole lot.
Well, the Jews helped themselves.
Yeah.
Who was fighting this battle? Who were these soldiers that were fighting for Israel's independence? The Holocaust survivors. And they wanted this worse than any American GI or any other country or anything. They were finally being allowed to return to the land God promised them, and they were going to keep it. And it was fierce. A lot of fighting going on. But in 48, they won, and it will take until about 1949 to get international recognition from everybody that they are a nation, and they're called today the Nation of Israel. It's their official name, I believe.
I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard a lot of miracles went on during that war.
Oh, I imagine that it did. God was in it all the way. Yeah, you bet. So in 48, they won, but they didn't win everything. The Jordanians were over here, and they weren't going to move. Lots of things were happening, and we're going to skip all that history. 1973, was it 68, 67, I think, was another one. There was these different wars along the way. Was the Six-Day War in 78? 50 years, 73. 73, the Six-Day Yom Kippur War, Egypt comes up and attacks from this side. Syrian forces come down this way, and the Jordanians came in this way. And in 6 days, Israel defeated the whole lot. And they got the Golan Heights, Gaza Strip got set up, so it's different things along the way. And even since they're in that battle in 73, there's been other changes that have resulted in a landscape. Yeah, I'll have to show you the map here. I don't want to run out of time. That's a brief history. So the Palestinians are, what are the Palestinians? They're not Philistines. They are Arabian Muslims who, during this period when the Jews weren't there, settled. And a Palestinian considers himself a native Palestinian if he's lived in the land since 1947 or has relatives who lived in the land since 1940. So if my dad died in 1952, but he was living in that land that time, he's a Palestinian, and I'm a direct descendant, so I have every right to that land because we occupied it for all these hundreds and hundreds of years. What's the Jews' response? Well, they argue that they've occupied it since 1000 BC, before the Muslims ever came into that area. The Muslim faith didn't start till here, roughly. So the Jews argue they have a much longer history in that land, and they're the rightful owners of it. And the Palestinians say, no, we have a right to be here as well, and you're treating us like second-class citizens. Apartheid, they call it. So that's the Palestinian. We're going to run out of time. I can see that. Who's the Palestinian National Authority? You'll hear that a lot, too. No. So during one of the many peace treaties, I just don't have a history in my head of all of it, Palestine was recognized as a group that could govern themselves. And the Palestinian National Authority, or the PA, you'll hear them called the Palestinian Authority, are the official governance of the Palestinian people. They are not recognized by Israel, but the Palestinian people recognize them as their authority. Let's move on now. Who is the PLO? Yasser Arafat's probably the most recognizable name. Organization. They're in existence today, and they represent the Palestinian people internationally. It's more of a political movement today than, back in the 60s, 70s was pretty radical. Today they represent them internationally. And they're trying to develop international relations between Palestinian people and other countries, because today the Palestinians, most people recognize them as people without a land, and they get treated not fairly, and that's one of the big arguments also. Who's Hamas? So we have Hamas and Hezbollah.
One of the factions
Muslims because they're non-joining.
I'm sorry, they're what?
They're non-joining together.
Hamas and Hezbollah is not joined together. Okay.
They fight amongst themselves.
Yeah, I don't think so for a while, but perhaps. You'll recall, and I'll look over at our map over here for a second. We have Lebanon, this is the border of Lebanon. Here, of course, that's Syria. Here's Dan, and Israel goes all the way up between them. But here's Lebanon, and a major political part of the parliament, I believe it is, that governs Lebanon is the Hezbollah. And they are a terrorist organization, and they are trying to defend against southern aggression. So their focus is this way. They're coming this way. Hamas, another terrorist organization. Oh, Hezbollah was trained by revolutionary troops, and Iran has been a huge supporter of the Hezbollah since it began, still is. They get money, training, weapons, all of that from Iran. Big supporter of them. And the Hezbollah went into Syria when that whole revolution was going on over there, which failed, but Aleppo and all that destruction that was happening in Syria, the Hezbollah was helping Syria, encouraging them and supporting them and all those sorts of things. Hamas, they're down here. And I know you can't see it from there, but this is Gaza's right in here, right where my finger is. And this little thing that's been there, and again, I'm going to give you a map when you leave. This is referred to as the Gaza Strip, this little area down in here. This is Egypt. So Gaza, it's just a piece of land with a border, border fence or whatever, but this is the Gaza Strip. So Hamas is down here causing trouble. Hezbollah is up here. This is Jordan. On the other side of Jordan is Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia right now, Saudi Arabia and Jordan want peace. And they're trying to get things to be negotiated into a peaceful settlement. These people up here, Lebanon in particular, Hezbollah, no. They're all Muslim. Now, Jordan's about 60% Muslim, 40% Christian, I think, the last time I went over. But Egypt, heavy Muslim influence. They're surrounded by Muslims who do not like the way Israel is treating the Palestinians. Let's go on down. That's Hezbollah, Hamas. Where's Gaza? I just showed you that Gaza Strip is down here. And then you saw rockets went into Ashkelon. It's got to be on here somewhere. Here's Ashdod. Here's Ashkelon here. There's Ashdod here. And then you hit up, here's Tel Aviv, right? Yeah, there's Tel Aviv right there. So basically the rockets you saw going back and forth, and the pictures that you see of offices and apartment complexes by the sea are either Gaza or Tel Aviv. All those pictures that you're seeing, and I've been to both places. They're actually beautiful. It's just a shame that the violence is infecting everything. And then they hit the southern suburbs of Jerusalem, which is right here. So they were shooting some over the hilltop, if you will, into Jerusalem, not to mention they had paragliders and I don't know what all. I forgot what I was reading now, but they came in by air. They had vehicles. They were taking Palestinians to sort of do terrorist activities in all these little. And what are they trying to do? They're trying to incite a Muslim overthrow of the Israeli government. All Muslims should get their weapons and go next door and shoot your neighbor. You know, that sort of the settlers. They don't like the settlers at all.
So one thing that is interesting is the distance. You know, when we look at a map like that, we don't think about.
This is New Jersey. In fact, I think Jersey might even be bigger.
44 miles from Gaza.
Yeah.
It's closer to Jerusalem.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
the furthest point here, if you get up into Golan Heights in this area where Dan is, that's probably the furthest drive you have. Oh yeah, you can get around fairly. Now traffic's choking everything. I mean, that's You get over there. Lots of people living there. In fact, I put that up here for you. There's 9.5 million people living in Israel. 7 million Jews, 2 million Palestinians, and then a handful of, quote, others. But it's only 9.5 million people. You say only. But it's the center of God's eye. And he's going to protect them, I think, for the time being. Now, when you get into Revelation, and the Antichrist breaks his the Antichrist creates a treaty or establishes a treaty with Israel so rock solid that Israel lays down its weapons. That's how good that peace treaty is. Don't see that happening anytime soon. And what happens? The temple worship begins, right? 3.5 to begin worship, temple worship. Middle of that, Antichrist says, "Nah, I don't know what I was thinking," and this is when people are told to get off their rooftops and get out of their fields and so on, because a horde from every direction is coming. This 200 million man army. If you stand up here at, that's Lebanon, sorry. Oh, here it is right here. If you ever get over to, not Megiddo, Megiddo, I'm correct. You ever get over here to Megiddo, you can look across, and this whole area right here is relatively flat. There's a couple of rolling hills on one side and on the other, but it's generally right down through the middle. This notch, you could easily drive a whole fleet right out the ocean, right onto land. It's just, that's how flat all of that is. And you can see standing at Megiddo where they would mass this enormous army getting ready to go in and finally crush the Jews. Because in the end, Satan's desire from the beginning, it's even mentioned early in Revelation, his desire from the beginning is to kill the Jews, kill Christ, so that he can become better than God. Satan wants to be above God. And he's massing this enormous army. The world is in a mess. And in fact, it says, if it wasn't for the sake of the elect, it would self-destruct. And right at the last second, when there's no hope, Christ comes back and squares the whole thing off. And I'll tell you, there's a whole lot about what happens when Christ comes back we could study too. But you're right, 44 miles from Gaza to Tel Aviv? Yeah. And then you have this little strip down here. This is where they're all headed. See, Israel said yesterday, get out of there. We're going to flatten Gaza, so to speak. We're going to come at it bad. So they're all pushing themselves down here. And here's Egypt helping Israel right now and supporting Israel with intel and some other stuff. We don't know exactly. We do know they're supporting them. So I don't know the population of Gaza, but those people caught in between Hamas and Israel are going to suffer in a huge way. And no mercy will be shown. You can just see it coming. I mean, they've already started. Because when you watch the images of these crackpots driving through communities and gunning down, there's one picture where they went right through traffic and gunned down everybody in the car on both lanes of traffic, where they were all just murdered senselessly. And women taken hostage and children and all this stuff. So this is the focus right now, is the Gaza Strip down here. Years ago, Jordan basically owned everything on this side of Sea of Galilee. And there was a war, it may have even been the 6-day war. One of the things Israel won from that is they won what's called the Golan Heights. You hear that a lot. And I've been up there. It's beautiful. It's rolling farm country going up the side of it's just so picturesque. The Golan Heights area is beautiful. Well, Syria is right here. So what they've got, I don't know if this map's probably not showing you. You'll see it on a little map I'm going to give you. There is a perimeter, a no-loan zone, if you will, that the UN runs, keeping the peace between Syria and Israel on the Golan Heights area. And then the other one you hear a lot about is the West Bank. Well, they're talking about the bank of the Jordan River. This is east, this is west. Jerusalem is right here. And the West Bank is all this right up, including eastern Jerusalem. So you got Jericho in there, other places, East Jerusalem. That's all the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and that's the two areas that the Palestinians lay claim to, that we should be allowed to govern it ourselves. You can't get in or get out freely. There are roadblocks, police barricades, all kinds of things when you go into that Palestinian controlled area in Israel versus coming back out. So it's not a pleasant way to live. One last little story. Over there in a tour, in fact, I think William, the pastor that edits this, was on that tour with me. And there's a real famous place to go to called, you all call it Shiloh. It's Shiloh, but it's where they kept the tabernacle for, I think, 15, 20 years, I don't know, a long time. They had the tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant, and all that in Shiloh. Then when David moved it to Jerusalem, that's when David danced, and there's all that story. So friends of ours, in fact, Gary, I may have Gary come in one of these days, Dr. Byers, Dr. Stripling, they're excavating Shiloh. And on one year of the tour, they had just found one of the horns off the altar that was there at Shiloh. And I wanted to go see Scott or Gary, whoever happened to be there at the time, and see if they'd show that to us. But to get into Shiloh, there's a tourist thing they take you into, and it's a hologram, I think they call that. It's like you can reach out and touch things and what it looked like when it was in place and all of that. And we're standing out in front of it. We have our little tickets to go in with our tour group. And this Israeli fella comes over and starts talking, in Hebrew to our Hebrew contact. And after a couple of minutes, he stops and she looks at us, and he has a group of like 15. We were a group of, I think, 20, if I remember. They'll have to wait an hour to get in, but if we let them join, they can go in with us. Cool. Okay, fine. So now the two groups join up, and I happen to be near the front of it, and the two tour people are talking again now in English, and they were talking about, you could see off in the distance, one of the Jewish settlements. They call them settlements. It's a suburb. I mean, they're nice homes, paved streets, cul-de-sacs, the whole thing. You can see it on a ridge over there. He lived over there. And we said, well, what's it like living with the Palestinians in a Palestinian-controlled area? Oh, it's not. We get along fine. We like using the Palestinians to build our houses, and they like doing it for us, and all of these things. And I thought, oh, that's nice. And he turned to go back to his group, and stuck here, the back of his pants, is a gun about that big, half of it showing, the other half, sure, they live in peace. You think we own guns here? You have no idea in Israel, let me tell you. So that's some of, I wanted to give you some of the layout so that when you're watching what's happening, it's not an easy solution. In fact, let me, while we're wrapping this up.
Politics in our country is getting really bad, blaming this attack on our current president.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's working with Saudi Arabia.
Yep. Yeah, and it's our fault. Correct. They're blaming Biden because he's helping with the Saudi peace initiative. And it's our fault, Trump says, because we gave the Iranians $6 billion back, and now they use that to fund the attack. And I don't watch Fox or CNN. I just don't. I just keep my eye. Jesus said, when you see the fig tree begin to show leaves, that's where our attention needs to be. What's going on over there? And it's just.
Maybe you can find this one. I don't know where it's located in the Old Testament. There is a prophecy about the Euphrates drying up. In the last days, the Euphrates is going to dry up.
The whole world's going to dry up.
But that's one of the prophecies that someone heard about. But
I don't know. Clearly, any waterway that would dry up would be a highway for the military. I mean, that's, at the end of the day, that's what it is. That's how Babylon got captured by the Medo-Persians. They dammed up the river, and in they came, just the riverbed. They just followed the riverbed. And in fact, Babylon had this huge wall built across the river, impenetrable, till 8 feet of water is gone, and then you can just walk right under it. And that's what the. So I want to show you this real quick. So I showed this to my wife last night. I said, look what I found. I'm going to make sure everybody in the class gets one. Why didn't you put labels on it? I said, they need to do that. Yeah. Well, a couple of things. So the little body of water at the top, let's see, we have people studying at home. I'll show them this map for a second. What's the little body of water at the top? Lake, Sea of Galilee. And then it comes down the Jordan River through the Jordan Valley, and it dumps into where? The Dead Sea. Now, where it's dumping into the Dead Sea, if you back up, I don't know, half a mile or so, on the left you're going to find Jericho, and on the right is Sodom. Then we come on down. As you're coming down, well, let's go back to the top a second. You'll notice that the map is only green in Israel. I mean, that's just a way to distinguish the pieces of the map. But if you look at the top up there on the right, see that looks like a big baked potato hanging there? That's the Golan Heights. And then if you look to the right of that, see that little dotted line running along there? That's the border that I was telling you that the UN patrol and keep the peace, because that's Syria right there. The rest of that coming down this way is Jordan. And of course, right across from the Golan Heights on the other side is Lebanon. And then you come down, you'll see in the middle of the map, you'll see a dotted line, a real ziggy, odd-looking figure. That's the West Bank. That's all the territory that's involved in the West Bank, including this bump over there, which is east Jerusalem. And then we come down here along the edge, and you'll see our little strip there. And that's the Gaza Strip. And as you get into that area, and I don't know, I was riding with somebody, it's not very long, you come to Gaza. And Gaza's a big city. Well, you've probably seen it getting smashed in the news. But Gaza is a very populated. I enjoyed it when I was there. Everybody was, in those days, everybody was getting along, and it was all about the tourist dollar than anything else. But they're trying to turn it into Palestine's fight for liberation, I guess is what I'd call it. From the Palestinian point of view, they have a right to be there. They're being treated like second-class citizens. They have no voice in anything, and they want to be recognized as a person with rights.
And there are a lot of Christians.
Oh, there's Christians everywhere in Israel. Oh, yes. Yeah. Yes. And the Messianic Jews are there, and the Christians and the Messianic Jews occasionally drive the Jewish people crazy. Yeah. And there's always little scuffles, no real violence. I think the news I saw the other day during, was it Yom Kippur? I can't remember. Some rabbi spit on a Christian. He was saying something and the rabbi didn't like it, and of course they got a picture of it. Isn't that, lovely? But generally speaking, the Christian and Messianic Jewish folks there live in peace with their Jewish neighbors. It's the Palestinian part, and there are lots of peace-loving Palestinians. They're the Sunni Muslim from the Sunnis, and most of them, they simply want to have a home, a family, a school, a job, and live like all the rest of us do. But then there's those that have all these political motivations, and you have no right to be here, we do, and we want you off our land and all that business. And of course, complicating it is Israel will not recognize Palestinian Authority or any of that. And that's been another bone of contention over the years, is particularly Netanyahu, but even before him, the settlers, where, yeah, that's a Palestinian controlled territory. Now get down there and build houses and move in and live among them, and we're not going to take it back. We just want Jews in there. And it's just a burr in the saddle, and now it's getting even more and more so. I'm sorry, what's that? Oh, ever since Netanyahu's been in office, yes. On the other hand, I don't know, maybe Golda Meir, I don't know that we've had a Jewish leader that was soft on any of that. All of them trace their heritage back to, we belong here, we fought for this, the 1948 War of Independence, so on and so on. And the tour guide we had on our last trip over there, Arit, she said, "We are people who do not bend the neck." Of course, the Bible calls them a stiff-necked people.
Yeah.
So the Palestinians have got their work cut out for them as far as that's concerned. But so there you are. I just wanted you to have a sense. It's in the news, a little better idea of what's going on. We'll resume our study normally next Sunday. Let's close in prayer. Father, we thank you for your presence in our lives. We thank you for the peace that it brings us, even when turmoil is all around us. Father, give us the wisdom to know what to do and when to do it. May we be, as James wrote, quick to listen and slow to speak. So, Father, this morning we lift up this worship service and pray these things in Jesus' heavenly name. Amen. Well, thank you all for being here.